Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Kimber Marie. I am your lawyer friend who is obsessed with all things intellectual property, and I figured it would be helpful to actually create a series, if you will, of videos kind of memorializing my experience in law school. As time goes on, I will probably forget some details of just study tips and advice that really helped me get the most out of law school and maybe things that I would have done differently. So I'm gonna make a place for them here in the hopes that they can help other law students. This first video, we're going to be focused on my first year in law school, 1L year, the year that they scare you to death. I'll start off by going through the classes that I took, what was the structure of the program that I was in, and then I'll talk about the obstacles that I faced, and not just me, but fellow classmates. And then I'll also share what helped me to overcome those obstacles, or if I didn't overcome them, in hindsight, what would I have done differently? And then to finish out, I will just provide the advice that I would give to you if you are a first-year law student, or even if you're considering law school and you want to know more about the process of law school. To begin, I went to Elon University School of Law. It's an expedited program, so instead of the average 3 years that a lot of law school programs do, it is a 2.5-year program. So we graduate in December, and then most people sit for the February bar exam. Depending on your situation. Some people might wait until July, but I think by and large, most students sat for the February. Another unique aspect about Elon is that they do a trimester system. So we have, as you would imagine, instead of like 2 semesters, it's 3 trimesters, and each trimester is like anywhere from 10 to 13 weeks. The August, if I remember correctly, was we have an August intro session, and then the fall trimester is 13 weeks. Winter is 10, and I believe spring is also 10. I would describe my first year as a mental game. And the reason that is because everyone, I don't care if you grew up around lawyers or if you didn't, although I do think that there are added obstacles for first-generation law students. But everyone is still getting used to what does it mean to be in law school? How do you succeed? Getting used to all this new jargon. Like, law school is its own mechanism, its own world that has all these new terms and systems that you're learning. And so for me, at least, when I went into it, I had my own expectations, and then of course there are external expectations from peers, from society, from family, your professors, but then there's also the reality of the situation. So an example would be like grades. Everyone's going to go in and they're probably going to have, even if it's not conscious, a subconscious expectation of the performance that they want to execute academically. And then you have that in your mind, right? And then you're also bombarded with all this information on how to be successful, how to study. And so your brain just gets all these little voices that are projecting their own expectations on you. Obviously, some people are probably better at filtering those out, but nonetheless, they exist. But the reality of the situation is that even if you don't perform well for one semester or the first year, or maybe all throughout law school, if you graduate and pass the bar, you are still a practicing attorney. And most people do not care about your grades. Like, I haven't been asked about my grades, except from mentors who are helping me and advising me while I was in school. Grades have been, like, the discussion around grades has been very sparse for me. But that's what I mean by like internal expectations versus external versus the reality of the situation. And that's why it felt like a mental game. As far as the flow of the year, August, we do a boot camp. So it's 3 to 4 weeks long. All of the 1L students get to campus early, and your classes are centered around an introduction to legal studies. So you're talking about cases, how to read cases, the IRAC formula, or depending on your professor, the crack formula, which If you don't know, IRAC means issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. CRAC is conclusion, rule, analysis, conclusion. And that's really just the way that a lot of legal writing, at least academically, in case law, you'll see it in like when you're reading precedent. But in law school, they really encourage you to write in an IRAC or CRAC formula. So we were learning about that. We had something I'm very grateful for and I'm very lucky to have experienced is that all of the professors at Elon, at least the ones that I was in contact with, cared a lot about the well-being of the students and balancing your performance as a future attorney and a current law student with well-being. So a lot of the August term, we were going over well-being and talking about how to be a good law student and to think like a lawyer, which you'll hear a lot of whenever you begin. And after August was the fall trimester. This is the first one. We had civil procedure, torts, legal research in our first legal methods and communications class. Winter was contracts, criminal law, a criminal law lab, and another legal methods and communications class. And then spring, you had an option. You could either do business associations or evidence. Whichever one you didn't take, you would take the fall of your second year, which I'll talk more about 2L year in another video. For me, I took, if I remember correctly, it's all a blur now. I took business associations during spring, which means that I had another legal methods and communication course. And then I think there were a few other, they would require professionalism courses as well. Spring was also when the law review process begins. I'll also make a video talking about that because that is its own thing. And I know that for a lot of people who go to law school, they're curious about one, whether they should do law review, and two, what the hell even is it? That was pretty much the flow of the first year. Those were the courses I took. But here's the advice I would give to someone who is either going through those same obstacles or maybe they're about to begin law school next year. I broached this subject at the beginning of the video, and that is pressure. That's why the saying is they scare you to death your first year in law school. And the reason that is just the expectations that not only are other people, society, the school, your professors, your peers that they're putting on you or projecting on you, whether they intend to or not. You also have your own internal expectations. I don't care how type B you are. Most people who go to law school, they are people who want to improve, they want to grow. They usually have very strong ethics systems and moral systems that they have. And so most of the people that I've met in law school, quite frankly, every person I've met in law school, there's just this internal pressure that they place on themselves. And I don't think that's inherently bad, but if we leave it unchecked, it can lead to burnout and mental health issues. I remember so crisply in my mind waiting for grades to come out that first trimester, and I was in my room waiting. I live at home with my dad, and I just remember not being in the best mood because I was so stressed out. And I think I probably, he couldn't tell why I was so upset because it's Christmas, I was on break, classes are over, you should be relaxed, right? And I probably was just very short because I knew grades were coming out that day. And if I could go back in time, and leads to the advice that I would give, it's communicate, say out loud what's going on up here. Obviously, within reason, you want to think before you speak. But if I could go back in time, I would have made it clear, I know I'm on break and yes, classes are over, but I am really, really stressed about grades because they are a big deal and they're not a big deal. And because of not being able to know whether I should care too much or not at all about grades was stressing me out. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. Some people tell you, you need to be worried about your grades your first year, and then other people will tell you, as I did in the beginning of this video, that they're really not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. And so it's difficult. And I think now that I'm talking about this, that could be its own video talking about why grades are a big deal in some ways, but not in others. I think that would be helpful. So I'll make a mental note of that. So the issue was pressure, specifically around academic performance. What I think helped me with that was starting to communicate more clearly with the people in my life about why I'm stressed, why I'm acting the way I'm acting if I'm having a bad day. Also creating a system for studying, trying new things, listening to people when they give advice. It doesn't mean you have to use their advice for every single task in class, but just trying new methods out when you learn them. You may come across a study tactic that you wish you had learned about 5 years ago. I know that was the case for me. So my advice when it comes to dealing with academic stress, academic pressure, is to utilize your resources, go to academic mentors if you have them. I got through civil procedure because I went to an academic mentor who I loved her so much because not only would she walk me through everything, no matter how slowly I needed her to do that for me to understand, but she was so encouraging because she had been there and done that. So utilize your resources, talk to people, learn how to communicate clearly, so that way the people in your life, like you're not sacrificing your relationships out of stress. Sometimes you can't help it. You're gonna have a bad day. You might snap, you might be short with people. If that happens, go back and apologize and use that as an opportunity to grow as a person and to strengthen those relationships by communicating. The second issue that I definitely faced 1L year, adapting to a new routine, a new way of life, all this jargon, it can be very overwhelming. And I am a first generation law student, so that means that in my immediate family, there are no lawyers. So I didn't grow up with them. Any advice or mentorship that I received, it was from people that I worked for or from people that I sought out through networking. And so learning all this jargon, I will say there almost seems to be like an unspoken culture to law school that I can't quite describe. So having to face that and learn how to adapt to it was very new and overwhelming and stressful. The things that helped me the most were to not get so tied up in law school becoming my identity. Like, I am a person outside of law school, right? I have a family, I have goals that have nothing to do with the law. So don't lose sight of that. Something that really helped me to kind of decompress and I think manage the stress that first year was honestly going for walks every day. Like, even when it was cold outside, I did this thing where I would make a list of all the musicians that I've been meaning to listen to more of. And on my walks, I would pick one, go to their very first album that they came out with, listen to that, and just listen to their whole discography anytime I went on a walk. And that's such a small, like almost silly thing to do, but having those moments in the day where I'm outside, I'm literally like touching grass, getting fresh air, sunlight, I'm listening to things that are motivating or uplifting, I'm taking my mind off stuff, was so helpful. Even if for you it's not walking, maybe it's weightlifting, which I picked up my second year, maybe it's some sort of hobby like pottery or getting involved in the community. Whatever it may be, I want you to give yourself permission to pursue those things. It does not make you a bad law student just because you're doing things outside of the school that aren't necessarily law related, okay? So that would be a very big piece of advice that I would give to manage the stress of having this new routine, this new way of life, if you will. Another thing that helped was having boundaries with creating friends, creating friendships. So for example, during that August term, I went in with the mentality that I'm not here to be everyone's best friend. You know, you should always be kind and respectful. I enjoyed meeting new people, but I didn't make it a criteria in my mind that I needed to win some sort of unspoken popularity contest. Like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to improve my career and my life. That is my priority. If I make friends along the way, which I did, friends who I love dearly, and I still see them very often now and talk to them daily, then great. That's just like the cherry on top. But I didn't go in thinking, I need to be like the queen bee or number one in everything. Like, that was not my mentality going into it. And because of that, because I had this almost healthy detachment with other people and creating relationships where I wanted them, but I didn't obsess over them, that really helped me to form, I think, good friendships that I could trust and enjoy. Some of my fondest memories from 1L year are having friends over for conspiracy theory parties. Everyone would make a PowerPoint of a conspiracy theory and present it, or doing Friendsgiving with all these people who were so new to me and I'm new to them. And here we are breaking bread that first year. Like, it was such a lovely memory, and I love that. So have a healthy detachment to relationships. Like, don't obsess over them, but be yourself. And if someone's being friendly, like, get to know them. Like, use that as an opportunity to make a new friend. And of course, bottom line, if you go in and you have no interest in making friends, at least seek out to be kind and respectful to everyone you meet, because these will be the people you work with in the future. They are the beginning of your professional network. They will remember how you treat them. So treat them with respect, because everyone deserves respect. Third biggest issue that I think is the issue that everyone's gonna face, whether they wanna admit it or not, is time management in law school. And my hot take is that you do not need to pull all-nighters to succeed in law school, okay? I did well academically. I don't really want to share my rank or my grades because I think it just comes off wrong, and I think it's unnecessary. The only reason I would feel like I have to get doing this, creating this content, is so that way you know that I'm not saying something when the reality is very different. But if you're interested, you can message me and I'll have that conversation with you. But just know that as someone who did well in law school, and I'm proud of the grades that I received, I never pulled an all-nighter, ever. I was rarely in the library because I preferred studying at home. Sometimes I would go to the library, depending on my schedule for the day. But my approach to studying was every Friday, I made a master list. I got all of my syllabi in one place. I looked at all the due dates. I had them listed out in one place. And every Friday, I made a list of these are all the things, all the readings, all the projects, all the due dates that are due for the next week. And I would prioritize it by this needs to be done first, this needs to be done, this can be put off till last. And I would schedule it in a way that I tried to, if I finished my list by the next week, I was at least 1 or 2 days ahead. Looking back, I think having that routine of every Friday sitting down, making that happen, carrying around this silly cardboard notebook that just had all my lists for each week in one place, helped me maintain my sanity, and it helped me manage my time because, one, I was organized. I knew when things were due. I knew what was coming up. I was not caught off by surprise. And the second thing would be trying out people's advice. And when I say that, I really, really, really mean the professor. If the professor is telling you that the exam is going to be set up in a certain way, listen to them, believe them. Don't try and guess, are they just saying that? Are they going to blindside me and put something that they haven't mentioned? Maybe they will, but you won't know until the day of. So don't guess. Listen to them when they say you're going to have 1 long essay, 3 short essays, and 25 multiple choice. Okay, great. Now you know how you can frame your studying. With studying, I always recommend starting earlier rather than later with incorporating multiple choice questions, even if you're just reading them over those first few weeks of class, because obviously in the first few weeks, this is the first time you're touching this material. No one's expecting you to be an expert in a subject you've never gone in depth with. But reading over model answers and multiple choice questions those first few weeks can help you understand, as you're going over these new subjects and topics, oh, this is how they test me on negligence. This is how an essay fact pattern is going to be written on a contracts exam. Incorporating actual practice exams as early as possible is helpful. And I do think it's good to kind of base your study plan around doing practice examples, because just reading your outline will not be enough. For me, my outline was a constant process of reiterating it over and over. I would take my notes from class, my summaries, put them in one big outline, which is usually the traditional method that you'll hear about with law school. But then I would take that outline and summarize it into an even smaller outline. And then I would take that outline and turn it into rule paragraphs that I would try and memorize. So that way, for example, if I am on a torts exam and I get a question about negligence, I already know how I'm going to define negligence. I just have to plug it in, remember it and write it in, type it in, whatever, and then fit that to the facts that are given and do my analysis. And that gave me more time to focus on the analysis. Maybe I should do another video about study tips, because that is its own beast as well. But time management. I feel like there are so many students who stress themselves out. They do these all-nighters. They are so tired. And again, it's a hot take, but I feel like if that's you, that is a red flag that you are not managing your time as well as you could be. Like, it is possible to have a balanced life in law school. And if this is how you are now in law school, even though it doesn't feel low stakes, but compared to practice, when you will be handling people's cases, your time management is going to be even worse, in my opinion, outside of school. So go ahead and build up these practices and routines now. And this is leading into my final portion of this video. I will never forget when I was networking, I had an informational interview call with an IP professor at a different school. And I was just at that, like all throughout law school, I would talk to anyone and everyone who was an attorney. I didn't really care what area they practiced in, although I did focus on, obviously areas of interest to me the most. And I spoke with this one attorney who is a professor at another law school. There's a motorcycle going by. I'll never forget the moment she said to me, I think this was like my spring semester maybe, I was just getting overwhelmed with all the things, and she said to me, you are right where you need to be and you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. And when I tell you, hearing that from a complete stranger who I've only been talking to for 20 minutes, like she was basically getting the cliff notes on what I was doing and my approach to everything and what my goals were, hearing that took off so much weight. So I want to say that to you, because if you're watching this, if you were trying to get tips and advice on how to be a better law student, what to expect, like you're actually trying to improve as best you can, you are not the person that needs to be worried. You are doing exactly what you need to do to be successful. So just rest in that. I know imposter syndrome, some people hate that term. Some people, they really, identify with that term. I know I dealt with a lot of imposter syndrome. Listen to me when I say that you belong here. You would not have this opportunity if it wasn't meant for you. Like, you worked your way here. They accepted you into this program for a reason, and you have a lot to bring to the table. So remind yourself of that. Make a list of all the things, the skills you have, the experiences you've had, and add to it as you go through law school, and remind yourself every day of how far you're going, like everything you're learning and all the skills that you're cultivating and honing, because you are. The second piece of advice, every problem is figure outable. If you don't perform well one semester, guess what? We can fix that. If your relationships are suffering outside of school, we can fix that. If you don't have an internship yet, or maybe your mental health is starting to tank, we can fix that. Do not sit in suffering, and especially do not sit in suffering in silence. People can't help you if you don't tell them you need help. And sometimes, again, from someone who had a really, really rough time with mental health my 2L year, that might be the hardest part, is asking for the help, going out and finding the resources, especially, for a lot of people, sometimes those resources are hard to come by. I recognize that everyone's in a different situation, but please, please, please try your best to not suffer in silence, whether it's about academics, career development, relationships, whatever it is. There are people, your professors, your mentors, your friends, they want to help you. So yeah, that would be 1L year in a nutshell for me. Those were the obstacles that I faced, the things that helped, the things that I would do differently if I were to go back, the courses that I took. If you have any questions specifically about the first year of law school, please put them in the comments. I'd love to help and answer as best I can. And I hope that this was helpful. Give me a follow on my social accounts at Kimber Marie James and connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you and be a part of your network and community. And tune in next time for my 2L version of this discussion.